Hey guys, what's up? This is Stephanie Fleitas here with CreatingWithin.com, the place to get in touch with your inner world. And today I want to talk to you about acceptance and surrendering in order to really bring in the changes that we desire and to bring more of those things that we want. So what I want to do is I want to share with you two experiences of my life in order to lead into this topic. So the first experience that I want to share with you might be one that many of you already know who've been following me for a while. You know that I've been traveling the world for the last year. And this is a desire that I had for probably 2 years prior to actually taking the leap and doing it. So what was preventing me from actually going into my desire of traveling the world 2 years prior to actually doing it was the fact that I had all these fears that I wasn't willing to look at. I started taking steps in that direction, but as soon as my fears started coming up, instead of looking at them, accepting and surrendering to them, I just stayed in place and didn't take action in any direction. It wasn't until about a year and a half later that I kind of was in a fed up mode, which is what happens to many of us, but we don't have to get there because I'm going to teach you how, was that I actually decided to look at my fears. And I remember one day I was sitting down and I was like, all right, I really want to travel the world and I have all these fears, but I want to do this. So I started looking at what I was afraid of and I started going through them and accepting them. And one of the major ones that was holding me back was having to accept that there was a real possibility that in traveling the world, once it was done and once my money ran out, I was going to have to start all over again from the beginning because I wouldn't have a car, I wouldn't have a job, and that really scared me at that time. But when I finally looked at it and I admitted to myself, hey, this is what I fear, and I accepted it as a real possibility and surrendered to it despite the fact that I was scared, once I did that, the energies opened up and I was able to take the leap and everything started to fall into place. Everything that I needed happened and it all happened within a matter of a month. I want to share one more experience with you before I lead more into the topic. When I started my intuitive guidance session and I started actually charging for my time and my services, I had my first paid client, I remember. And they had scheduled with me, but they hadn't yet made a payment. And usually when you schedule with me, you have to make a payment at least 24 hours to 48 hours before a scheduled session. And since this was my first time, I was a little anxious. I remember that one night I had this desire to email the client to remind them and confirm their scheduled session. But we had already confirmed it not too long ago. And I had to catch myself, and I recognized in that moment that my intention for emailing them was based out of fear. I wanted to email them because I was afraid that they were going to cancel and I wasn't going to have a client. So it wasn't until I actually recognized what was happening inside of me and I felt it and accepted it and said, okay, hey Stephanie, I'm kind of scared right now because I really want this client and I'm afraid that they might cancel. I decided to not act on my fear and I didn't email them and I surrendered to the possibility of, hey, they may cancel and I might not have a client and I have to be okay with it. In the moment that I accepted and surrendered my fear, I promise you that within the hour I received an email with a payment confirmation. And what I realized through my experiences is that whenever I've been afraid and I've acted out of fear, I've actually pushed away and kept those things that I wanted away from me. In other times when I've been calm and I've accepted and surrendered to my fears, like in these cases that I'm sharing with you, I actually attracted that which I wanted. And it came so easy because there was no resistance, there was no trying to hold on, trying to change how things are. One analogy in all of this. Let's use a door, for example. Let's say that there's a door in front of you, and behind the door represents your fear and represents your desire. And as long as you don't go through your fears, the door that is going to give you an opportunity actually then becomes the wall that prevents you from advancing. So what happens to most of us is that we have a desire and then bam, the door, our fears come up. And what most of us do is that we're not willing to look at our fears and even less go through our fears. So we end up staying behind the door and we don't move at all. We don't grow, we limit ourselves because yes, in many ways if we don't go through the door, we don't have to experience that in which we fear. But what we don't recognize is that by preventing or trying to avoid having to experience that in which we fear, we're also keeping ourselves away from that which we desire, which both reside in the same realm. So it isn't until we can accept, which is a first step, and acceptance is a combination of admitting where you're at, whatever situation you might find yourself in, and accepting it, being okay with it, realizing that there is a possibility that it might happen. And surrendering is the ability to cross through the door regardless of what may happen, and trusting that whatever happens, even if what you fear comes to passing, it's for your highest good. Because in the end, everything in this life is about growth, and in order for us to advance in life, we can't be afraid to move through our fears past that wall. Otherwise, if you don't move past the wall, guess what? You're always going to stay in place. You're not going to get very far in life. And it's going to limit the amount of experiences or the level of experiences that you're going to have. So I hope that this makes sense and that it helps you in your inner world wherever you may be. In the meantime, continue to communicate, connect, and create. And if you have any comments for me or questions, leave them below and I'll be sure to respond. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.